good.
Thank you.
Is everybody ready for another Gator game this weekend?
I hate to admit, I forgot to watch the last one.
I said I wasn't going to watch them this year, and as soon as the games came on, I on the TV. I was given an assistantship at Mississippi State, and so they're my first team. And the coach of the Gators now came from Mississippi State before he was at Florida, so I root for both of them.
Oh, well, that's reasonable of you.
Reasonable, yes. Well, my wife is a Gator, so I really don't have a choice. So.
So Gilreath, I hate to call you out, but that wasn't Mississippi State. That was Ole Miss.
No, we beat LSU last week.
Oh yes, Mississippi State did.
I will call out Ole Miss every day. We do not like them at
all. Same here. Mississippi State all the way. Besides Gators, of course.
Yeah, we threw for 600 yards on LSU. So.
I know. It was impressive. I was quite pleased that we stepped up pretty well. So yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm sorry. I thought you were referring to the Gators against Ole Miss, which I was happy that they.
No, yeah, we like I despise Lane Kiffin, and I have no use for Ole Miss. In fact, there are a couple of Ole Miss grads I see driving around Gainesville every once in a while, and I will roll down the window and yell at them.
Oh, no.
You know, everybody in Florida State and Florida, you guys play for national championships, and all we do is play for bragging rights, so it's a lot meaner.
Yeah.
That's right. I get to go back to Tallahassee now and bring some more Gator to Tallahassee. So.
Well, they don't know what football is up there.
Not right now, they don't. So.
It's a full year to go up there and be a summer.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 members. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 11 that aren't in yet. So we do have a quorum if you all want to start, or it's 4:02 if you want to give it a couple more minutes.
That's fine with me.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pop the agenda up, and then apparently Sue noticed there's some typos and stuff in the minutes that we might want to go through when we get to those, but I'll put the agenda up first.
Good, Sue.
Well, you taught me well.
I didn't see him this time.
What I'll do is we'll start at 4:05, which is in 2 minutes. I'll just tell you when we get there.
What's DRMP?
That is our original founders' names: Dyer, Riddle, Mills, and Precourt. And they were founded actually on my birthday, the day I was born, December 27, 1977. So I'll date myself.
Oh, you child.
That's right. Baby, really.
And so that they just, you know, the members have moved on. We'll just say that. And they shorten the name, a little bit easier to say. All the engineering firms seem to shorten their names now to acronyms. The engineers can't pronounce all the long names, so all the engineering firms are becoming acronyms now. But you know, we've been around for 40 years, and still the largest Florida headquartered engineering firm, headquartered in Florida.
So you do a lot of this work that you're doing for us.
Yeah, we do a lot of planning, long-term planning, throughout a lot of industries, but education is a passion of mine. We do a lot of work at UF as well as USF, Seminole State. We've done work for Santa Rosa County schools.
Great.
So it's, you know, it's definitely a passion, that in conservation. We just won a statewide award for some work we did in Stark in Bradford County, where they had, when Irma came through with hurricanes, dropped a lot of trees in, and we went in with drones and figured out where the log jams were, and then used GIS to go and map where all the access to the creek was, and pulled out 600 million tons of debris, and downtown Stark doesn't flood anymore. So
wonderful.
We do a little bit of everything. It's a lot. I love what I do. It's a lot of fun, and we try to really focus on building the community. We're doing wild spaces, public places. We just finished Northside Park with the senior center and the new playground up there.
Yeah.
If you know Kiwanis Park, right on 8th Avenue, we're finishing up there. And one we're really excited about is Sweetwater Trail that's going to go from Depot Park down to Williston Road, so you can ride a bike on that mile from Depot Park down to Sweetwater Wetlands.
Great.
And it is.
We don't do a lot of
for-
private development. We don't build the Dollar Generals and the big student housing that everybody hates right now. But
Right, that
we
we
do. We
better
like
start
the schools and the cities and the parks and the trails and the churches. That's what we like.
That's good.
I think we can go ahead
Okay.
and start, Mrs. Roy.
Okay, the meeting is called to order. This is the meeting of October the 1st of the District Advisory Council, October 1st, 2020. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for serving on the committee. And we'll start with introductions. Maybe go right across. I'm Eileen Roy. Go ahead, Ms. Legg.
I'm Sue Legg, appointed by Eileen Roy.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Mosley.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Miss Mosley representing Kanapaha SAC. I had a son that was there, so
Thank you.
representing Kanapaha.
And I see Mr. Gilraith.
I'm John Gilreath, project manager for DRMP. We've been a 5-year consultant for the school board for long-term planning.
And Mr. Thomas. Hello.
Hi, Reginald Thomas, Director of Transportation, Alachua County Public Schools.
Okay, Ms. Wise.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. I'm Jenny Wise, and I'm K-12 curriculum.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Crosby.
Hi, Julie Crosby, appointed by board member.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Ms. Taylor.
I'm Oakview Middle School, Kimberly Taylor.
Thank you, Kim. Bart. You're okay.
Bart Birdsall. I am from Lanier Center.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Mr. White, is he's not here, I guess. Ms. Kidwell? I think she's muted.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Donna Kidwell, and I'm representing Exceptional Student Education and Student Support Services.
And Ms. Neal, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Kim Neal, Director of FTE and State Reporting, as well as the Office of Student Assignment.
Thank you. Ms. Sertzi?
Heather Startsy with Shell Elementary and then Hawthorne Middle High School.
Thank you. Mr. Valentine?
I'm Tristan Valentine. I represent Norton Elementary.
Sorry, I couldn't see you very well. Thank you. Ms. Kuna?
I'm Maria Cunha. I represent Meadowbrook Elementary.
Thank you. Ms. Fields?
I'm Cindy Fields, Newberry High School.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Reinhardt?
I'm Linda Reinhardt. I represent the Buchholz SAC.
Thank you. Ms. Larimer?
Sorry. I'm Kathleen Larimer. I represent Santa Fe High School.
Thank you. Ms. Gill? I think you're muted. Let me see if I can. Ms. Gill, I can't hear you. Can you, there?
Yes, I didn't know it was me. It's Janet Gill. I'm here for Gainesville High School, and I'm here for Keith Watts.
Oh, thank you, Janet. Let's see. Miss McNeely, I'm sorry. She's muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leonetta McNeely, Alachua County School Board member.
Thank you. And Miss Mack?
Sherry Mack, I represent Lofton High School SAC.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Mack. Who else? Mr. White? I don't think you.
Paul White, Assistant Superintendent, Operations.
And Ms. Freeman?
Valerie Freeman, Director of Educational Equity and Outreach.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Ike Jones? Is he here? I think he's muted if he is. I can't see pictures of everyone. Ike Jones, not here? Okay.
Oh, he's there, but he might be doing the mute. Ms. Taylor, I think did we miss Kimberly Taylor?
No,
Oh, okay,
Kimberly.
sorry.
There's a few others on the second page, Ms. Roy. There's a few.
Yes, I'm looking at that now. Ms. Courtney?
Hi, my name is Duan Courtney. I'm representing Duval Early Learning Academy.
Thank you, Ms. Courtney. Ms. Holmes? Cindy Holmes? She there? She's muted, I think. Okay, we'll go to Ike Jones.
Isaac Jones, appointed by Gunnar Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Williams? Are you there, Ms. Williams? Mary Williams?
Hi, Mary Williams, and I'm representing, yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm
I can.
Mary Williams, representing Lincoln Middle.
Thank you. And Mr. Bakari?
Hey, good day. Adam Bakari, Mabay Middle School.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Bakari. Ms. Certain?
Good afternoon, Tina Certain, Alachua County School Board.
Thank you. I didn't think we got Ms. Nguyen.
Hi, this is Suzanne Nguyen. It looks like it's showing up as my daughter's name, Rachel Nguyen, but I don't quite understand because I logged in through my work email. So I am the Director of Community Planning. And
thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Ms. Reinhardt?
She already went.
Oh, she did. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's see, who did we miss? Anybody? Did Ms. Courtney speak? Oh, she did. Okay. I'm losing it here. And I guess, of course, Ms. Clark.
Karen Clark, Superintendent.
And is there anyone I missed?
Yes, Mrs. Roy, Chairman Roy, this is Donna Jones, Deputy Superintendent.
Sorry, I guess I need to go to another screen.
Brian Moore, Staff Attorney. So.
We're on page 3, right, Brian?
Oh, I see. I see.
Probably.
Well, I so appreciate everybody being here, taking your time. Okay, is there anybody? If there's nobody else, we'll go on to the approval of the July 7th board meeting minutes.
This is Sue Legg, and I would like to suggest a little editing of the minutes.
Sure.
4 things that I found. In one place, cares is misspelled. In another place, funding doesn't have the ing, it goes ig. Cynthia Chestnut's name seems to be misspelled. And 4th, there's a typo on school districts. It's got an apostrophe S, and I don't think it needs an apostrophe.
Can you tell me where these were?
That's asking too much, Brian.
I'm going to look for underlined red things. So, well, first of all, let me look for.
Try spell check. It just, I know cares is spelled right in one place and not in another.
If anyone sees these can you see as I'm scrolling? Is that showing?
Yes,
up?
we can see. We have to look real close, but we
let
can
me zoom
see.
it then.
Better.
Okay, cares. There's one cares.
Yeah, now there's another one.
There's one.
There's Cynthia Chestnut.
Right. Same paragraph for chairs there, cares there, Brian.
Yeah, and there's some more for Cynthia. I think that she was in there like 4 times.
Okay.
I caught it when it went by. If you go back up, Brian, I caught it as you kind of went through that one. Scroll back up a little bit. Thought I saw it up there too. No, maybe not.
Can we just
We can fix
incorporate
those.
whatever errors and just move to amend with that?
Yes.
Oh, there's funding there in that paragraph.
Yeah, the last word.
And Jackie Johnson's not here for us to criticize her. So. And is that,
I thought it was just a virus in the typewriter.
Paul, is it Lavender AR or ER for Lavender 256?
I don't know. That looks wrong.
ER, I think. I don't know.
Paul White hopefully knows.
Yeah, I think it's ER.
Right.
Like the color.
We'll make it ER. If you want to go with the motion to make those typo changes, and then I'll just do it here.
Absolutely. Do find the one on school districts apostrophe S.
Right there. It's in the budget update.
In the blue.
Oh, thank you, editors, and thanks, Sue. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the July 7th meeting as amended?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
I think Mr. Bakari.
Second.
Thank you. And who was that made the second?
Mosley.
Ms. Mosley, thank you. Okay.
Just,
All in favor?
Brian, there is a CARES Act in there someplace that's got too many letters.
Yeah, I got that one.
Oh, okay, then I'm happy.
Here's one that's missing one.
All right, I think we have a motion and a second. All in favor then of the minutes of the meeting?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Now we'll just go on to the rezoning update with Mr. John Gilreath. I'm sorry, I don't think you made an introduction, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I did. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Let me get everything pulled up.
Okay.
Ms. Roy,
Yes, ma'am.
while he's pulling that up, during our discussion after this, during the group discussion, will we have the time to ask questions that we have related to other things that the community has brought up and asked us about?
I don't see why not. Mr. Moore, if that's okay legally, I think it's fine.
Yes, no, that's what's anticipated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
John, before you start, Ms. Chestnut
sir.
did just joined, so
Oh,
we fixed your typos of misspelling your name, Ms. Chestnut. So
okay. Well, thank you all for being here today. We presented this to the board. We've incorporated recommendations and changes from that talk, and we're going to show you those today while keeping all the original content in. In addition, I'm going to show you another outreach tool that we've developed since we have spoken with the board. How I want to start out with this is exactly what I said in the last public meeting is this is the beginning. We have worked together on the school board side to bring together a initial starting point to begin the discussion. And the metaphor I like to use is that this is a community mosaic, not anybody's individual portrait. And so it's going to take input from the subject matter experts on the board. It's going to take input from the board themselves and the final decision to be made by the board. But most importantly, it's going to take input from the advisory council, as well as the community, and most importantly, parents, teachers, and principals. So we're going to go through this today. There's a lot of information to cover. We have tried to succinctly show you the methodology, bring you the recommendations, and give you some detail on where these first iterations land and the areas that are affected. I'm happy to answer any questions that come along. It may be beneficial if I stop at some point during this and we can have a conversation instead of fielding questions throughout, or we can do it at the end. But there's a lot to cover. And I don't want to get too far down the road on things if there's something that somebody doesn't understand. So maybe in the chat, if you need me to stop, let Brian know and Brian can jump in and we can stop and cover something. But I will try to stop once or twice during this and see if we have any immediate questions we can answer that don't cover things that are going to be coming up, if that makes sense. So with that, I'm going to jump right into it. So the agenda today, we're going to go through the overview of School I's location and talk about the planning considerations. We're going to show you student capacity in the area of the county that we're talking about. We're going to cover some of the current and planned construction in this area. We're going to introduce the iterations and the starting point for the discussion for the community. And then discussion by the school board or the proxy today, the District Advisory Council. So for an initial overview, School I is located in the Oakmont Plan Development. It's an 18-acre site. It was granted to the school board as part of the development agreement, located in unincorporated Alachua County. Right now, the capacity is for up to 900 elementary school children. We're looking to have somewhere in the area of 750 to 800 in there right away. We don't want to fill them up. And I'll talk about that in a little bit and some of the lessons learned from the last rezoning effort. I want to cover that we've essentially been working on that Oakmont site since 2017, 2018 with the School Planning Advisory Committee site selection, which I covered for the DEC, I guess now about 2 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun, but through that, we evaluated a number of sites throughout the county and landed on this as the #1 recommendation with additional recommendations for other properties. But because of the proximity, the location, it already being in the school board's control, this was a site that was selected by the committee after I believe it was a 8-month long process. I want to talk a little bit about 2019 student data. This is the last full year, full school year that we have data for, and what you're looking at here. And this is something that I showed the DEC the last time I talked to you, talking about the density of students. I'm looking where we have pockets of heavy concentrations of students, and this is going to be talking primarily about the area around I today. So I want to point out a couple of areas in this development along Archer Road, especially Celebration Point in this area. You have a very dense concentration of students here between University Tower Road and 20th Avenue. This includes Southwest area, Gainesville Swag. And then you have other concentrations up here between 39th and Newberry Road. And so you have some hot spots that are concentrated along 75 and Archer Road. And I want you to keep these in mind as we go through the presentation today. This is a quarter-mile search, so we're essentially overlaying a quarter-mile buffer of points throughout the sites for each student and seeing where the densest population of students are. So we have this information district-wide for the last 5 years for public schools, charter schools, and homeschooled students. One of the requests we had from the board was better maps. So I've tried to label these with large labels so you can get some idea about where these main thoroughfares are. I hope this is a little bit better. If the board likes it, you can blink twice and we can make better labels if it's something that you want, but I've tried to make an attempt to meet the request from the board for a little bit more context in the area on these maps. As we go to that, here's one without any streets labeled. This was another request from the board to talk more about demographics and socioeconomics. And let me move my screen share out of the way just so I can see my entire slide. What you're looking at here is American Community Survey data from the census. So this is not 2020 biennial census data. This is one of the best estimates that we have right now. And what we're looking at right now is the percentage of the total population.
I think we're losing John's connection.
Losing
John, you're coming in and out here. Hold on, I'm gonna come next door to him and give him a different Wi-Fi, I think.
Yes, I'm on the guest Wi-Fi. So give me 1 second.
Do we have John?
Is that better?
That's a better screen, but your voice is rough.
Is it really? It's usually worked here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo, kind of a delay echo that comes, but let's see how it goes now with this new one.
If the kit continues, I can just plug into the Ethernet, and we'll see if that works. So I apologize. So what you're looking at here is a percentage of the total population that is Black. And I want to point out areas of diversity that people don't think about west of I-75, in Alachua, in North Gainesville, and then the area that when we think of a minority population in Gainesville is on the east side. So this is just something that was asked for by the board the last time, and we'll go into another one. Now we're looking at median income by household. And so areas in red are what we would consider, essentially below the poverty level. And areas in dark green are your areas with higher income for the county. The highest income in the county would be the dark green area. So you can see where the new school is located. Is this still not working, Brian? Thank you, sorry about that. So this starts to show a little bit different picture when you think about some of the areas around town, and especially here along Archer Road and south of the University of Florida, here in the Tower Road area that I've pointed out before, here in the northwest area of Gainesville, and here south of Williston Road, and in the southeastern portion of the county. Just some background info for what things look like in this area. Now we start thinking about where our youngest percentage of the population is. And you can see these areas in red continue to show up on the west side with a large amount of population moving there. One of the requests we had was for population shifts. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to illustrate that. But we do want to show you where the population, the school-going population, lives in Gainesville. So we're doing this at the block group level with U.S. Census data, the best that we have. Again, it's not 2020, but this is an idea for you of where elementary school age children and public school children that would be attending the public schools are located in the county. We showed this map, I've kept the original map in there. I've updated a 2020 map, so we'll get into that with that has the labels. But what I want to illustrate here is just the overcrowding of the schools in the southwest area. So what you're looking at is the amount of students that are actually attending the school versus the capacity of the school. And you can see throughout the southwestern area and portions of in the city of Gainesville, you consistently have numbers over 100% capacity, which means the school's overcrowded. There are children in portables. There are children in the southwestern portion of the district that are eating lunch and shifts. And so this is just a reminder here of what capacity looks like in this area versus the rest of the county. This is the same map, just kind of showing that in a simplified version of capacity that's over 100% for these schools and the location of school life. When we go to 90%, which is essentially the school choice number, you know, that's what the situation looks like countywide. So a number of these schools are between 90 and 100% capacity. Looking at 2020, we have the labels in there. I wanted to keep the original slides, but we've updated the information with the 2020 student data. And the numbers really don't change. In fact, some of them continue to climb in Newberry. Idlewild remains consistent. Littlewood, you know, these schools are at capacity. Meadowbrook is the newest school, elementary school, and you can see the capacity numbers at Meadowbrook. And we'll talk a little bit more about Meadowbrook coming up. Another view of this, same at the 90%. So you can see the situation hasn't changed. In fact, it continues to grow in schools that are over capacity. So let's talk about some of the planning considerations in this area. Number one, we want to address the capacity for elementary I as well as the surrounding schools. That means looking at the infrastructure available, the future land use, and the development that is planned and has occurred over the decades in the area. We need to consider diversity of the student body and programming. The student body should be reflective of the district's racial composition. And we had a discussion about this, and one of the requests was from the board was to come back with the actual racial composition of the district. And so I've done that. If anybody wants to take notes on this, it's 42% white, 34% black, 11% Hispanic, 7% multi-race, and 5% Asian. So it's a board policy to try to have student bodies that are as reflective as possible of the district's racial composition. So when we talk about diversity in programming, we're talking about race, but we're also talking about programming, ELL, ESE, all of the programs that are offered. So we need to think comprehensively about achievement, programming, and diversity. We need to think about the sales tax initiative. You have elementary school I being built, which is what we're here to talk about today, but also significant renovations for capacity at Idlewild, Metcalf, and Bishop Middle School. And if you remember, the goal of the entire sales tax initiative is to increase capacity, remove portables, and have planned renovation or construction at every school. So as we start this process, again, I go back to that first bullet point, address capacity for elementary I and surrounding schools. We need to think about the situation, not just at I and the students that live around I, but essentially at these schools that are overcrowded and have been overcrowded for a long time. While we're looking to make I a representative student body, we also need to avoid making the other schools less representative. So we don't want to majorly shift those totals if it's going to take it away from the ideal vision of the board. We need to consider the initiative's current construction of Idlewild, because we'll talk more about Idlewild, but Idlewild is at significant overcapacity with the facility, and then a number of students who were zoned to go there. And part of the goal of this committee was to make sure Idlewild opened up without portables on its campus. We need to think about transportation along arterial and collector roads. When you think about moving students around, we think about some of the bottlenecks that we know to be true. Newberry Road at I-75, Williston Road, Archer Road at I-75. There are significant traffic concerns there, and that impact the transportation of students. So transportation is a major part of this. We also have some lessons that we learned from the Meadowbrook opening, incorporate the student locations, future land use and development trends, because the large zone with Meadowbrook opening led to immediate full capacity. School was open and it had portables almost immediately after it was open. We want to avoid that at I. We want to avoid that for every school. So looking at Meadowbrook, let me stop there and say, does anybody have any questions right now?
Mr. Gilraith, the overall breakdown of demographics, was that school-age children?
Yes, that's a public school attending students that we work with staff to get.
Okay, that doesn't include charters or does it?
That's an excellent question. I don't have the answer to that. I will have to check.
I believe that did include the charter students.
Did it? Okay, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, it did, but okay. Thank you.
Hi.
Let me make a note of that.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And looking at the racial composition of the schools, I don't know if you have this information today, but can you tell me what schools exceed the 34% Black? And
Ms. Chestnut, we will definitely be getting into that with some detailed slides coming up.
Okay.
So I don't want to spoil the fun for that just
well,
yet.
Then, well, don't spoil the fun. Thank you.
Okay, I will be getting to that.
Okay.
This is what I want to do right now is kind of set up the scenarios and the things that we're thinking about. So, excellent question, and I will have some very detailed graphics for you. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and keep moving on. So Meadowbrook, you're looking at the zone for Meadowbrook now, and if you can see my mouse, you know, Meadowbrook essentially runs from the western boundary of the city of Gainesville all the way over to 100 and I think this is 122nd right here. No, 143rd. Sorry, 143rd. This will be 122nd. Newberry Road. So this includes the town of Tioga. There's a lot of development planned in this area. West End Golf Course is for sale. Heavy development in and around this area upcoming. So a school right now at 722% permanent capacity has 820 students attending. When you look at the walking district, oops, excuse me, sorry, my mouse just went crazy. Let's get back there. When you look at the walking district, you can see here in blue the areas, and we'll get a little bit closer view here, but the areas in blue are within 1 mile walking to the schools. In yellow, we're 1 to 1.5 miles. Red is 1.5 to 2 miles. So you can see there's a significant population of the school that lives outside that 2 mile boundary. It's a little bit closer view. To be more specific, over 727 of those students live 2 miles outside of Meadowbrook. So those students are eligible for transportation by bus. Anybody over 2 miles it's a board policy where they need to be transported by bus. And what we're doing is looking at these elementary students, where they live, the locations, how close they live to the schools. We're going to do this for a few more as we walk through. What I want you to know about Meadowbrook is currently right now, if every student who was in zone for Meadowbrook went there, you have 936 kids attending Meadowbrook, with more development to come. So there is a significant capacity issue at Meadowbrook that we know to be true. Going back to walkability. Looking at walkability, how we create these. I think I've covered this before for previous meetings, but these are what we call service areas, and they're based on Alachua County's E911 data set. It's based on the road center line. It's not a hard buffer just dropped on top of a school saying 2 miles in any direction, because that's not truly how cars and people move. And we use student locations and the required bus service areas to say these are the students that are outside of the 2 mile areas. And what I want to call to your attention, what keeps popping up is this area, right, that we looked at between Newberry down to Archer. So not only do you have significant dense populations of students, you have students that are outside of any 2 mile transportation zone, and you have students with, you know, at a disadvantage socioeconomically, a lot of these areas. And this area keeps on popping back up again and again and again as an area that is eligible for transport and eligible with very dense student populations without a lot of options to be moved around the county. I'm going to jump to Idlewild because we did talk about Idlewild earlier. And looking at Idlewild, the same concerns are at Idlewild as Meadowbrook. It's a very large zone. You have 462 students who live over 2 miles outside of Idlewild. It's located directly in a residential neighborhood. But you can see the number of students who actually live in that residential neighborhood. You could walk there without having to cross Williston Road. When you take a look back at the entire zone, you can see how large that zone is, stretching almost all the way down to Micanopy, stretching up and capturing Celebration Point, going all the way over to almost Longleaf along Archer Road.
How far north does it go, Mr. Gilraith?
This is, let's go back one. Good question. So this, this is drawn through, I'm hearing an echo now, but this is drawn through the University of Florida's campus. This runs along here, 16th, and then down some residential roads here, and this is Williston Road. So it comes up here. I can get you the exact street. What I want you to know about Idlewild is there are 1,100 children zoned for Idlewild at a capacity of 557. Right now we have over 700 children attending there. And if everybody who was zoned there attended, 1,100, over 1,100 children. We know of significant overcrowding here. There's also planned construction right now under design for Idlewild to renovate, expand the capacity, and have an essentially new facility in the next couple of years coming online. I'm going to go through a few more of the schools on the west side and talk about some things. And this is one that I've shown you before. This is Hidden Oak. Something to think about with Hidden Oak is you can see on 23rd here, there's a walkway. There's a little bridge that goes across 23rd, and you can see how that walking distance to Hidden Oak actually bleeds across 75. You don't see that really anywhere else in the district. So this is something I like to call attention to because of the walkable bridge over 23rd and where the school is located and the street grid. This is actually something that you don't see a lot of in the other districts. Something else you don't see a lot of is this neighborhood right here showing up outside of the 2-mile boundary. And that's significant because if you look at the school location right here, these homes are literally on the other side of the fence from the school. They could jump over their fence and walk to the school. But because of the way the street grid is laid out, they have to go down here, over, up, or up this way to get to the school. And it is longer than 2 miles by street center line distance. So if we just dropped a 2-mile buffer around here, these children wouldn't be eligible for transport. But because we're looking at things like the center line distance, this shows up as a pocket further than 2 miles, and it's remarkable that it is literally across the fence line from the Hidden Oak property. There's no easement there or anything, that there's just straight residential lots. But that's something that I like to point out to people. That's the detail of looking at these walking distances. You can see in this case, the street grid, this little island here, further than 2 miles in the middle of a 1 and a 1.5 mile because of how the street grid is laid out. Hidden Oak is a little bit different, right? When we talk about Idlewild and we talk about Meadowbrook, you saw a huge number here with numbers descending. And here there's a little bit more even of a split in the walkable sections to the over 2 miles. So it's different than the other schools that are surrounded. You know, Meadowbrook is right next to Hidden Oak with a completely different scenario of walkability. When we talk about Terwilliger is a different situation as well. Terwilliger has a little bit of walkability that bleeds across. This is primarily commercial development. There isn't a lot of residential. There are some residential apartments here across Newberry Road. What I want to call attention to is the heavy dense area we've showed you before. And this is a southwest area of Gainesville, commonly known as SWAG. There are around 400 children here eligible for transport. Right now, for the most part, they go to Terwilliger. There are some sections that go to Childs, but for the most part, they go over to Terwilliger. And you can see how I-75 here affects the walkability, and the street grid affects how things over here are over here. So the students are picked up on buses and they go up across 75, either over on Newberry or they go through on 20th. Both highly congested areas in the morning and in the afternoon. Note, you're back to this same scenario. A large percentage of students who live over 2 miles from the school eligible for transport. Talking about the initiatives coming up in the area. We have Meadowbrook 2022 because Meadowbrook is planned to have portables removed with the construction of I, removing children from Meadowbrook, bringing the capacity down, removing the portables, and restoring the physical education field. There are projects planned throughout the rest of these schools. I wanted you to get an idea. Some of these are smaller, minor projects that are then going to be followed up by a larger one further down the road. But to get an idea of what's going on in and around the area, the largest ones would be I and Idlewild that are occurring right now. When we talk about the initiative considerations, a lot of these are the same that are for our planning considerations for I. You know, we think about design capacity and the age of the school. There was a great question from member Certain about what is the difference between functional equity and social equity. And I didn't answer that right for you. And I apologize for that. I got kind of thrown and I wasn't really answering your question. And when I think about functional equity, I think about the facility, and social equity is more about the people. And I hope that's a succinct explanation to you, the equity of the facility versus the equity of the students and the people. Funding constraints are always something that we have to think about, as well as project timelines and when construction is occurring. And it's going to affect things like I is opening up. What is that going to mean for Meadowbrook, and what students come out of Meadowbrook? What students come out of the other schools? And we're following the board policy on this, as well as some of the state mandates. Impact criteria, sustainability and the economy, the social equity, health, safety, and transportation. These are all things that go into designing schools, selecting school sites, and changing school zones. So the rezoning effort to date. If you've seen any of my presentations before, I tell you that, you know, we've been working for half a decade for the school district with long-term planning data. So we've worked with the IT department. We work heavily with planning and facilities. We work with zoning and attendance. We work with legal. We work with transportation. We bring all this data together to give a larger operational view to the team members and the leadership of the school district. I mentioned that elementary I site was selected through the SPAC, the School Planning Advisory Committee, in 2017-2018. And the facilities initiative schedule was approved by the board in 2019. This effort has been presented to the board. Now you're seeing it, and we're going to start public input throughout the fall of 2020. So after today, after the recommendations, taking consideration recommendations, we are going to start public outreach, and I'm going to talk more about that down the road too. But we're going to jump right into the iterations. This is iteration 1. For lack of a better term, this is what we call the cookie cutter. We come in, drop in the zone around the school, fill the school up to meet as close as we can the board policy for a diverse student body, and open the new school. This would be about a proposed population of 774 students. You can see it has a town of Tioga and all the development south of Newberry Road. It comes down Parker and it grabs sections southwest of Archer and some of the development that's occurring in this area. You can see a large portion of Childs and sections of Wiles and Idlewild, as well as some sections of Archer. There's even a section of Newberry up here. These children currently go 7 miles west to Newberry, whereas would be a little bit more than 2 miles down to elementary I. What iteration one does not do is really relieve the overcrowding at Meadowbrook, significant overcrowding at Idlewild, or truly address some of the future development that's coming. So while we may be able to fill up the school with iteration one, come in and drop in this zone, it looks clean, it looks nice, it doesn't address a lot of what we're seeing. And you can see this in the breakdown of, it would be a 60% white student body, 12% Black, 19% other minorities. So we have in that the Asian, multi-race, and every other, Native American and Hawaiian, Pacific Islander in there, 10% Hispanic, okay? So this is a starting point, but we felt from this, with the other planning considerations, we had to try and work some more to another level of iteration. This is just another a larger view. So that iteration one, the racial composition, again, reading the numbers back, the composition of the public school district is 42% white, 34% Black, 11% Hispanic. So do we meet the goal for this? Not necessarily, in fact, no, in my opinion. When we look where those students are coming from, we start to remove some of the pressure on Wiles. So that's a good thing. We don't really remove any of the pressure on Idlewild. We remove some of the pressure, but really not enough on Meadowbrook as needed. And you can see the diverse spread of students throughout the rest of the district. And there's a number of reasons for this. Some of these are charters. Some of these are homeschoolers. Some of these are, they're going to another school for whatever reason, programmatic. They may have a parent that works at another school. We could find out the reason for each one of them, but we have not dove into that. At pretty much every level, that's a personal family by family choice that's occurring. And so, but we're looking at a larger trend. Where would we be drawing, these students from? And so this gives you an idea for iteration one. Another look at iteration one, coming back to it and just hitting back on the fact that it doesn't really affect Idlewild's district at all in any meaningful way. You have a lot of students in this area and this area that are still going to the same schools. It doesn't affect Meadowbrook overcrowding situation. I don't believe it takes into effect a lot of the development that is coming.
It doesn't really affect Newberry either, does it, Mr. Gilreath?
No, it doesn't. There's some public housing here that we draw from that is going west to Newberry, but it doesn't really pull into Newberry. No.
Well, the thing is, they're 133% at capacity, and they don't even have their 5th grade there.
Yes.
The 5th grade goes to Oak View Middle.
It does not pull into Newberry. That is correct. Right. So we went through a number of iterations, and a lot of them would come out where we would not meet goals at all. And so what we're going to show you are the iterations that we believe start moving forward with a way to present a beginning discussion for the community. This is what we call iteration 8. We don't have a better name for it. Maybe we will come up with one, and maybe you have some suggestions today. But iteration 8 is significantly different. And we're going to go through, because one of the comments I got back was we need better maps of this. But I think it's important you look at this initially and see, as I point out, you have elementary I now running over and picking up the swag area all the way to 75 and down, and expanded a little bit more east. You have Wiles expanding in and taking in this area of Celebration Point. So they're going to come out of Idlewild. What does that do for Idlewild? Well, in this iteration, the current number of zone students over 1,000 goes down to 694, getting more in line with the population that can be comfortable capacity at Idlewild. This brings Wiles' attendance down. It bumps I up to 802 and bumps up Childs by about 90 students. Archer comes down, Newberry goes up a little bit. Meadowbrook comes down significantly, and here's why. Meadowbrook's zone now in this iteration stops at I-75. So in this iteration, east of I-75, north of 39th, these students in this iteration attend Terwilliger. I will say for the benefit of everybody that the most comments we've gotten back so far have been from this area up here north of 39th. We have an email set up for people to make comment on this, and I would say the majority of the comments that have come in have been from this area so far. Those are the significant highlights. There are small little minor tweaks in some of these areas here, and we'll talk about them. But the major highlights are splitting the Meadowbrook to account and give some more room for the future development that's coming. Elementary I expanding east, and Wiles and Idlewild significantly changing portions of their population. And so this chestnut to go through, you can see on the breakdowns here, I have a better one. The numbers may be hard to read, but you can see the symbology, the colors have stayed the same. And so you can see in this iteration what these percentages look like across the board. Let me show you the next slide though, because, oops. I will come into it. The next slide I have a slide in here coming up that has the current versus iteration in. We'll get to it, but I want to go through these zones a little bit more in detail so you can see what they look like. So this would be Archer's new zone. Archer still extends up here to Newberry because of County Road 241. You can see where sections have come out and come into I. We've also moved it over a little bit west here. If you look at iteration 8, I'll go back one. This red line here was a portion of where Newberry was current zone stands, and we move Archer out a little bit further here. Okay, so this sort of area that's pushed west. Right around here. Some of this is Watermelon Pond. There are some students that live in here. This puts the current attendees at 492. The proposed will be around 475. Childs' zone is significantly moved in eastward, essentially stops at the Hale Plantation parcel border. And also there's an enclave up here that goes away. That was in the swag area where those children were going to Childs. Those children would now go to elementary A, the new school. We do have a population increase in this iteration in Childs. Essentially, in this area, we have between 3,000 and 4,000 students for 3 elementary schools. So it's a very crowded area. There were a lot of iterations focused in this area on trying to move things around to get that balance. Hidden Oak zone doesn't change much with the exception of, it does change in the where the swag area does not go to Hidden Oak anymore. This border moves north. Proposed goes up a little bit, but there are capacity changes at Hidden Oak that account for that. Idlewild is a big shift. When we think about some pockets of diversity that aren't always evident to people, you have Palms in this area. You have a significant elementary minority population, elementary school age minority population that lives here just west of Celebration Point that currently are zoned for Idlewild. And move out of Idlewild and move a lot closer, taking a right out of Archer Road, thinking about transportation, and go down to Wiles. And you can see what it does for the capacity, where we feel this is probably a good area to be in to make sure we are at under the new capacity for Idlewild. Something else, let me mention something else about Idlewild is this area here. Currently for Williams, we've moved this down, this zone here. So this is Main Street and Williston Road. There's a little area here of students that we moved down who would be going to Metcalf once Metcalf is complete, possibly Williams, but they've been moved out of Idlewild to again get this number to a manageable number for that area. Something else to think about Idlewild is a significant amount of backups we get on the transportation side because of the location, because it's a left turn out onto 16th or Williston, excuse me, because of the area in a residential neighborhood. There are significant backups in transportation there. And so another benefit of reducing this zone, reducing the number of students who are zoned to go there is hopefully, and with the design, the redesign and redevelopment of the site, solve that issue. Looking at Newberry, there weren't a lot of changes to Newberry on iteration 8, moving it west here. And this going into Meadowbrook, we talked about the V coming down, and a portion moving west here for elementary I and taking in public housing here. Newberry's population goes up by about, approximately 30 students in this iteration. And when we think about Wiles now, Wiles moves in a little bit here off of 20th, takes in this area Celebration Point, takes in portions that had gone to Idlewild, brings down the population significantly, and hopefully accounts for some of the new development that's coming around in this area, south of Archer Road. This is a Terwilliger zone, so you can see it running along I-75. You can see the locations of Hidden Oak and Meadowbrook. You can look at the area of Robin Lane. It's about a little bit over 3 miles this way. If you go down 43rd to Terwilliger, it's around the same distance to each of these schools. But this is a significant shift in this zone. What does it do for the current and proposed is it would bring the proposed student population down by about 30, but really what it does is a significant shift in the student population at Terwilliger. There's no way around saying that. It really essentially takes 400 children out of this area who'll be going to the new I and takes in the area here north of 39th. There's a significant population of students here, and they now go to Terwilliger. There is not a lot of residential or students who live in this area that are within the walking zones of Terwilliger. There are some, there is not a lot. Primarily they're up the northern portion of this zone. This is also very close to Talbot, this area. And this is an area that has been rezoned before, most recently as part of the Meadowbrook opening. So something to keep in mind as we're going through this. Finally, looking at Meadowbrook at the end of iteration 8, you can see how the zone is expanded west to Jonesville, essentially. The count for the developments going to be coming on would drop the current and proposed attendees down almost 400, account for the next phases of Tioga coming in, account for the sale of West End and the new development and all the active development that's coming in and around this area. Meadowbrook, if it stays the way it is, could be extremely overcrowded very quickly with new development coming online. And so I think this is a chart that I talked about earlier. This is iteration 8. And what I want you to see here is this top line is the current, and you can see the purple, dark blue, that signifies the Black students. You can see the teal, that is the white students, the green Hispanic. Maybe I got my colors wrong. I should say blue, and maybe that's a teal. But you can see the changes. And so where are these changes significant and where are they not significant? Idlewild, with 400 students being moved out, does not change nearly any in their makeup, which to me is pretty remarkable. Elementary I in this scenario, you remember we were at 60% white before. We're at a much closer iteration now or a much closer model to meet the policy of 39%, almost a equal split with this iteration between white and black, and almost equal split between Hispanic and other minorities, closer to this goal. You can see Hidden Oaks diversity change significantly, doubling in black students. Chiles stays about the same. Wiles doesn't change tremendously, becomes a lot more equal of a pie. You can see a significant change in Terwilliger from 49% black down to 30%. Newberry loses some diversity as well in this iteration. What I want you to know is that no iteration is perfect. If we make one change somewhere, it is going to have a domino effect and change things down the road. And I mentioned diversity in a couple of areas, as well as programmatic diversity and thinking about transporting students. What we don't want to do is overload a student or overload a school with a certain program. If we have a certain amount of, say, ESE stations and we have way too many students who are in ESE who are slated for that school, that's not a good thing either. So we need to think about this programmatically. And so, as we've been working on this as a committee, we've had weigh-in from transportation, zoning, attendance, facilities, every department here. And again, this is the starting point for discussion. Iteration 8 raised some questions in our mind. And so we made a small tweak. And when I say small, there is no small tweaks in this because this is affecting families and children and students and schools. So every decision that we make has a significant impact on somebody. Very well aware of that. But what we're doing is trying to find that starting point to bring to you all for discussion, to bring to the community for discussion. So iteration 9 is essentially the same with a difference. And that difference is Meadowbrook now expands east to take in a portion of students south of 39, which changes the diversity again, makes it a little bit more equal. We'll look at the next. Okay, so here's what that looks like, and we'll get to the next one where you can see where it doesn't stop at 75 anymore. It goes east. The old zone went along here and went and continued east all the way over. This is south of 39. And you can see the Terwilliger zone where that section is now out of it, where it ran up here on 8. What does this do to those populations? You remember at Meadowbrook, we were around 560. This brings up goes to 750. Does not leave a lot of room for the development that's going to be coming down the road, but it does address some of the diversity that we saw. Terwilliger goes down to 423 students in this iteration. There was a significant amount of students in this iteration back west in Meadowbrook. It changes the composition of Terwilliger tremendously. So you can see it goes from 49% black to 17% black. Meadowbrook goes from 19% back to 26% black on that shift. Small changes in these zones can change these pie charts tremendously. And again, when you think about the breakdown, 42% white, 34% black, 11% Hispanic, you can see which of these meet those goals and which have some work to do. Now, without radical changes, you're never going to see equal pie charts across the board because of demographics in the county. That would take radical rezoning changes, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But when you think about how these are laid out and what you know to be true about where students live, where the pockets of diversity are throughout the county, what we're trying to do is make these as close to the goal as possible and use the data that we've had for the last 5 years not to go on preconceptions or what somebody thinks to be true, but to look and find, there are pockets of diversity that show up that people aren't aware of. And on the West Side, people aren't aware of. And that is what we're finding and where we are looking at these zones. Think about transport, diversity, and programs to try to get this equity across the board, to try to make this composition to meet the policy as close as possible. I'm going to stop there and say that our next steps, we have input from the school board members. Today we're presenting to you the BAC for input. We're working on a form for feedback from each of the affected school principals. And starting next week, we're going to begin to roll out dates for virtual public meetings for input. We also have established the following email for public comment. I can tell you that the second that I left my office after I presented to the board, I had 5 calls on my voicemail at my office. And we immediately figured out this needs to go to a public comment central repository maintained by the school board for open record. And so we established this, this email. Now I want to talk about some other comments that we've gotten and what those have been. They've been great. And we have gone ahead and created, let me bring this up. Give me 1 second if I didn't lose it. Oh, here it is. Great. We've created a web map that we have put out to the committee so far that can be rolled out to the public for the public to view these zones. The board workshop was about the methodology, but we know that people are going to want to zoom in and look at their house. And so this web application gives people the ability to enter in their full address. It's based on a worldwide address repository. So you need to put in your full address, which includes your home, city, state, zip code, because there are lots of First Avenues throughout the world. So we want to make sure you're looking in this area, but it will zoom in to your home and show you the proposed zone. So after this, we have this splash page telling people how to use it. You can turn the current school locations on and off. You can look at zone 8. You can look at zone 1. You can look at zone 9. You can enter in your full address and it will zoom into a location and show you what those look like. Now, a lot of the comments we got were the maps were too confusing. You had too many lines on there and to show streets and to show current zones and proposed zones and this iteration, that iteration. We've tried to keep this as clean as possible. You can zoom in and click on an area and get what zone you're in. We have labels, you can zoom out, but we try to make it easy. Now, we know also to be true, not everybody has access to the internet or wants to use a function like this. So that's why we have the email address. I'm sure that people can call in for information as well too. With that, I'm going to stop and open it back up for discussion. I hope I've covered everything that was covered in the board update as well as a request from the board. I'm happy to start answering questions. I'm going to stop with this screen share so I can see your faces, but if there's something that you want me to bring back up, I'm happy to do that.
Go ahead, Ms. Chestnut.
Thank you so much. Okay, are in your racial iterations, are Head Start students counted in that racial composition for any of the iterations?
Well, anybody who is attending a public school during that year, if they were registered, is counted.
Okay, so and if they
but
were,
it's kindergarten through 5th. Sorry.
Okay, so the Head Start students are counted in the racial composition, but they may not be there next year. We don't know where they're going to be, or do we know? We don't have that grant anymore. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
all those dots that he has on the maps, those are students that are currently in kindergarten through 5th grade. Now, the 4234 numbers, I'd have to check. I do not know if that included Head Start, Pre-K, ESE, or other students, or if it was purely K-12. That I don't know.
Yeah, okay, and so the ideal number of pupil stations for an elementary school for the state, one time I thought it was 600, then it moved to 800, and now this school you're talking about 900?
Yeah, the school has always been designed for a permanent capacity of 900, but to fill it up right away has not been the intention from the beginning. If someone from the school board wants to weigh in on that, on the capacity question for Ms. Chestnut.
Yeah, yeah, my data may be very old. I'm just interested in that number. So it's just moved. The ideal number for a school, but elementary school is now 900. Is that what it is, Ms. Clark?
Right, Dr. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Chestnut, part of that, well, much of that is driven now by what the state allows you to spend per student station. And
Okay.
so while yes, there's probably an ideal number, and actually the 600 number as a former principal sounds really great for a great size elementary school.
That's what I
but any more new construction, you can't afford to build a school of 600 anymore because you'd come in way over the student station cost that the state allows. Mr. White could probably add a little bit more to that, but even statewide, it sounds like that is really what's driving those numbers because even like middle schools, many times you're seeing middle schools in the 1,000 to 1,200 range regularly now instead of, you know, a 700 or 800 or 900.
I see.
So.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. If you look at the new elementary schools being built, they're all around 900.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think I had another question. So I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Crosby.
I have a question related to the difference between iteration 9 and 8. I'm trying to understand what the benefit was in 9 over 8, other than just the difference in which families, that is families south of 39th rather than families north of 39th that get moved to Terwilliger. Is there something that I'm missing in the benefit as far as, it didn't look like it was a better makeup of students in the pie charts, and it wasn't a better capacity. There was not a benefit there with Meadowbrook. And so am I wrong? Is it just the difference in who gets moved to Terwilliger rather than north?
No, there is a pocket of diversity there just east of Santa Fe. And so that's an attempt that if you're going to move the public housing that's there down to I, that goes to Newberry, that would be planned to go to Meadowbrook or I in these iterations. And east of there's a pocket of diversity of Santa Fe that goes to Meadowbrook. Then when we moved to Terwilliger, we saw what it did to the diversity at Meadowbrook. And so we put that area in iteration 9 back into Meadowbrook to address that.
So it made Meadowbrook more diverse, but it made Terwilliger less diverse, didn't it?
Yes.
Quite considerably less diverse. I think they had 17% Black after that change. And what was the difference in the diversity at Meadowbrook with that change?
Off the top of my head, I think it goes up by around 10%. Yeah. Yeah.
By how much percent?
Around 10%, I think. I'd have to go back to the slide for you. Do that.
Thank you.
Let me do that right now for you. So Meadowbrook currently is at 19%, and iteration 9 is 26%. Iteration 8 and Meadowbrook at 16. So yeah, about 10% increase there between 8 and 9 for Meadowbrook.
And those currently, where are those students in the public housing zone for right now?
Newberry.
Newberry.
It's a 7-mile bus ride west.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Chestnut, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Member Roy. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I can't see everybody at one
Okay,
time.
thank you.
Ms.
Thank you,
Taylor
Madam
also
Chair.
has a question.
John, I missed this number at the beginning, and I think you gave the overall Black population of this area.
No, I gave that in the, I had census data shown percentage wise, and I can bring that back up if you want to see it. Originally in the presentation to the board, we gave that information, but it was based more on the total of Alachua County, and the request was come back with the student age, not overall county. If you'd like to see that slide again, I can bring that back up.
Yes,
Let me do that, okay? Give me 1 second. You're going to look at yourself for 1 second while I bring it back up.
Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Yes. So, this is of the whole county, and I'm just going to point out, this area here, this is Waldo Road down to Archer. Williston Road comes here. So, I mean, this is 76 to 100% Black. Orange is 51 to 75%. Blue is 0 to 10.
Yeah.
So you can see, sorry.
No, so the children are in one pocket as we thought.
Yes.
Okay.
But, I'll point out that this is still significant, 11 to 25% in some areas, but it's not at that, 34%. When you look at the yellow, orange, and red, yellow, orange, red areas, those are the areas that are above that threshold.
Okay. That's a very interesting map. Do we have that map?
You should have this in your handouts.
Okay.
I don't know. This is based on 2016 American Community Survey data again. Shameless plug, please fill out your census if you haven't. It's been extended. That is the data that drives this.
And this presentation, updated from the one we gave to the board, will be up on the website hopefully tomorrow. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
And Ms. Taylor has been waiting. She has a question.
Go ahead.
Where did my meeting go? I'm sorry.
Yes, I had a question. And it's kind of a general one. I know that you're getting a lot of input, community input. So there's going to be like broad individual community input, and then there's input from a group like this. How will you quantify the input you receive so that it can be considered and acted upon? So for example, like, will there be a Google form where we can vote, like, I like this iteration, or here's my concern, kind of consolidated down? Because in these meetings, a lot of people express lots of different things, and some people are more, extroverted than others, and people have different concerns. And so you can come away and say, well, the input was this, but it may be just because that what stood out to you. It can be very subjective. So I was wondering, how do you quantify in an objective way what the community input was, whether it's from a group like this or whether it's from individuals that are emailing or calling in, so that you really can look, or the board can look and say, here is what the community had to say, and either, incorporate that, accept that, reject that, or even show the community, hey, here's what you had to say, here's how we considered it. Because I really like how I watched the board meeting as well, and your presentation there. And then I see where there were really actionable ways that you use that input to change some of the presentations and the information. How will the community know, and how will you know what the community feels is my question.
That is an excellent question.
Okay.
That's an excellent question. I'm going to speak first and then pass it to Brian, because there are some legal ramifications on this. Rezoning can be a very legal centric issue. In my mind, I plan to use technology, right? So we want to be able to have people to view these iterations very detailed. I don't want them to look at a paper map. To be able to zoom into your home gives you a definitive view of what's happening. So number one, we want to expand on the past and use technology for people to access it. This is open record, so we do want to have comments documented, which is why the minute I started getting personal phone calls at my office, I let the school board know. I told the people that called me, you need to email this to the school. Anything you tell me, I'm going to email to the committee, and it's going to be open and public record. And so from that, we knew right away we need to have a email, and that is the open and public record. Everything has been forwarded that I got. I told them to email me, and I forwarded that on. So it is an open in the sunshine right now. And there were, beyond that, my mind is, we're going to have to do these virtually because of COVID. So these are going to be virtual meetings. So, there are doodle polls where we can get a vote. I think continuing to solicit comments and feedback, we're going to get a lot of information back. Ultimately, this decision rests with the board to make. This is the board's decision. We're going to be giving the recommendations with input, but it is going to be a board decision that's voted on by the board. And so the input can come to us. It can also go to the board members. And I don't know, to be honest, have we talked about having a voting mechanism right now? I don't have that in place, but I think that is an excellent suggestion. We need to think about how to do that with technology to give people who are attending that meeting a link to say, do you have something you prefer on this? As well as have the ability to comment, because sometimes yes, no, maybe is not enough context, right? I like this, but it may be better if you do this. That's really the crux of the matter, is getting that constructive feedback. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't like. Here's what I'd like to see changed. We know that it's not perfect for everybody. We know that. That's why, again, it's a mosaic, not an individual portrait. And I really appreciate that suggestion. I am deep in drawing lines. I know I want feedback and input, but that is an excellent suggestion about how to go about doing that. Thank you for that. Brian, I'm going to open up to you on the legal ramifications of input and how we need to respond to that.
Right. So first, repeating what John said, this is ultimately a school board decision. So those 5 board members, their opinion matters obviously the most, and it's ultimately the only one that really matters. I think the DAC, as part of the board's strategic plan and designed to get input from across the county, from people who are familiar with the schools and also in touch with the community, I think that holds a lot of weight, more than just any individual comment. But you never know who's going to have a really interesting or important piece of information that we may not have. So, I mean, but the key is to have, as John said, all the technology and the data so that when somebody, let's say we have a meeting and it's with the Wiles principal, and so it's for Wiles parents, and a Wiles parent joins the meeting and asks, did you consider, or what would happen if we have all that background information, we should be able to answer that generally right then and there. And so if somebody were to suggest, well, why can't you leave Meadowbrook the way it is, or leave something the way, well, then I'm not sure that takes us very far in terms of how much we have to do beyond that, because Meadowbrook has 6 portables or whatever the number is, with immense growth happening in the current zone. That to me is asking us to ignore the board's promise through the sales tax to eliminate portables. It's the only real sales tax initiative at Meadowbrook, is to eliminate portables and restore the fields. And it just doesn't really take us far. So some individual comments won't probably take us very far, because they might run counter to board policy, the equity plan, the sales tax initiative. So it's kind of hard to gauge exactly until those comments come in. I will tell you that of the comments that we've been getting largely from the people who reside north of 39th, some of them are concerned about Terwilliger's current grade or the students that were there before, which quite frankly, this is a very personal thing for people, but that's not really the way we can make decisions. We have to look at the entire region and the global picture and make it all work from school to school. but others pointed out, well, but hold on a second. I just have a question about why there are 4 schools closer than this one. Or trust me, I travel down 55th in the mornings and it is a nightmare to be driving there. Those are, I think those are real questions that deserve answers. More so than don't send my kid to a D school. Well, it's not a D school. And I bought my house specifically for this school zone. Anyone that does that is doing it at risk. Most districts have rezoning a lot more often than we do. You can't buy your house based on the school zone unless maybe it's on the school property already, or certainly right next door. But so I don't know if that really answers it, because it really depends on the comments. There's some that we can be like, that's a great question, but look at this, or this is what that would do, or, and then there's others that if they're kind of a non-starter, then they won't go very far. But if as long as we have the data to answer the questions as to what the board and what we're looking for, a representative student body at the new school, make sure Idlewild opens with no portables, try to eliminate portables at Meadowbrook, try to eliminate portables as much as we can everywhere else without making any of the school zones worse than they currently are. That's kind of what we're guiding us. So if somebody comes in with something, with an idea that makes 4 schools 75% white, we're not going to go very far with that, so.
Right. Can I just jump in with a real quick follow-up? I'm sorry, Ms. Crosby. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Just a real quick follow-up. I don't think, and what I'm saying is just quantifying the input. It's not necessarily endorsing, affirming, accepting, or validating all the input, but just knowing what it is. Like, for example, I work for a local company where whenever we got customer or client feedback, if you run a business, sometimes it's irrational, sometimes it's rational, sometimes it's reasonable, sometimes it's not. But we will quantify it with a color coding of, was this comment negative? Was it neutral? Was it positive? And it would be red, yellow, green, just so you would know, because even when community input is deemed a non-starter, it would be good to know that, wow, 80% of the community has an idea that's a non-starter. Like, it just helps you. It helps you. It's input. You know what I mean? Positive, negative, neutral, whatever. So, and that's hard to quantify, and it does take some subjectivity to throw it into those categories. But a negative comment when you hear one, or a negative or a non-starter or whatever when you hear one. But that's still input. That's still the community. And so if that's being considered, there has to be a way to sort of categorize it so you actually know what people think. And that's that. I'm not saying that's easy. I'm certainly willing to help with that, but I think it's important. So
Yeah, my immediate thought on that is just that we have 8 school zones and we're creating 9. And most of the people are really only worried about what it means for their particular home. So is it a negative comment if they say, don't change my school, but they have nothing to say about the other 7 school zones? That's where I get, it's hard to kind of say, well, it's neutral for 7, but negative for 1. It's not. It's just negative. I just don't like that. Don't do that one. So yeah, it's something definitely to think about. Right now, basically, I just have in my mind, we're going to have a giant notebook of everything we've received and be able to kind of go through it and be able to address, like, these were, what the general aim of these comments were. These were ones related to this zone. There's ways to sort them, but I like that idea kind of.
I do too. I had thought about it more from, like you're saying, Brian, of transportation concerns, equity concerns, achievement concerns, that sort of thing. So thank you for that. That's a great comment.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say that I'm a little disappointed that there are only 3. This is it, right? 3 choices?
No. I wanted you to know from the beginning, this is the starting point.
Okay.
We can't go out and say, everybody draw their own. We have to come out with a template to say, here's where we're starting. Let's start the discussion. So these are sort of this cookie cutter I hate that word. I hate it, hate it, hate it, okay? But it is the best description of coming in and dropping the boundaries around the school and saying, bam, we're done, right? Elementary I, here they are, but we're not going to address Meadowbrook. We're not addressing Idlewild and all the things that we're talking about in that area. We have run the achievement models. Now it is from data that's, and if you watch the board workshop, it's from data 2 years ago. So you have to be careful with that. But what we found in the achievement models was no school went down, most went up. But it is a beginning point right now. You can run into when and I'm just going to go on a side here, please forgive me, but when I worked for the city, if anybody remembers Southwest 8th Avenue, when they came to the board or the council with 8 options with alternative A, B, and C, and how long it took to get through those 42 options to get to a decision on it. And honestly, the time is not there with the school going in. COVID has delayed this. We intended to start this last spring and COVID blew that up. And so, you know, there is a timeline that we have to meet to be able to get this open.
What is the timeline?
The timeline is the school will be opening in 2021.
I mean, for the decision, like what timeline are we on that the public has for your public comment? And
So I can run through that.
Go ahead and cover that.
Yeah, so the plan is after today, so today's October 1st, October 21 is going to be a 6-hour Zoom kind of, I'm calling it a district workshop. The Zoom meeting will just be linked to anybody that come in throughout the 6 hours, ask your questions. After you go to YouTube to watch so that other people can join. That's one. And then every school that's involved, and I have to reach out to the Swag Center too, because I haven't had a chance to talk to them yet to see if they have capabilities of doing a virtual meeting. But each of the 8 schools that has been on the list, we will do a school-based meeting, try and get with the principal and the PTA. That'll be over the next, that's the wrong calendar, 5 or 6 weeks, probably up until the end of first week of November. And then I'd like to bring all that. So after we've had those like 8 school meetings, the big district meeting, this meeting, the board meeting we did a week ago, all the emails, take all that and what do we have? Where are we going? You know, what's our final, again, cookie cutter example? What is our modifications to 8? How many different modifications are there? And bring it back to the board for a workshop beginning of November or December. We have a new board member starting on the 17th of November. This is not something you want to have any overlap between boards. So the beginning of the official adoption process needs to be after that. So a workshop in early December for the board to see to bring back basically everything we've gathered from these public input sessions. And get their last kind of input, and then first reading. So this becomes a policy at that point. First reading would be the December 15th meeting
15th.
at the board, with a public hearing then at the January meeting, which is somewhere in the middle of January. And the ideal adoption date, second reading, would be February 2nd, because that coincides with magnet applications, school choice applications. It comes in a couple of weeks before the district starts allocating staff personnel at all the schools. So you need to know how many people are going to be at I and the other schools. So you know how many, teachers, how many other staff members, all that happens in March usually. So that's why we need to get it done in February so that the school can be built, not just physically, but population wise and all the logistics that go into it. Transportation.
Something else that I want to point out is, transportation starts their routing in June for the next school year. Ahead of that, we have to have the registration system Skyward rectified with the new zones.
Oh, yes.
To where the children live. That takes a lot of back end work on the database side. That data is also used by transportation in June, starting on the routing. So there are some significant things that start for next year's school planning this is how it goes every year. Planning for next year essentially starts in January.
I'm going to ask Kim Neal to talk about school paths because I'll get it wrong. School ranges and paths. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. We would have to, once all of the zones are determined, all of that back end work would have to happen in Skyward to set individual school path ranges by street, by house numbers. We set those individually with then which path they go for elementary, middle, high. All of those would have to be adjusted for any of those addresses that are changed in any way. So for all of the 8, however many schools it impacts, as well as then we set that for, as I think John mentioned, for new student online enrollment. That is defaulted by school path with our new online system. For school zoning, for zoning exceptions and school choice, that's all defaulted into that system as well. So all of that back end work will take us time to get in before we can open the online applications for zoning and school choice, before we can open the online new student online enrollment for the following school year as well. And before transportation can get those ranges and all of those other people who need to use those.
This is Sue Legg. I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Legg.
You mentioned and showed the graph on the race percentages by school with, say, option 9. And there were a couple that looked questionable, but by and large, it was clearly much better than earlier iterations. You just briefly mentioned the achievement projections that no school would go down. That also indicates that some schools may not change, but we don't know which. And
we don't have, I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt you.
well, it's the things all go together in my mind, because the third thing that you talked about was that some schools are deliberately kept below capacity in anticipation of growth.
No, I'm sorry if you took it that way. In the iterations we're talking about is Meadowbrook needs to come down in capacity because they're overcrowded.
Right. I got
No,
that.
there's growth coming in Meadowbrook. So if you keep them where they are, it's going to be even more overcrowded.
Okay, that's a very helpful distinction, because I had this vision in my head of empty classrooms at Meadowbrook because you were looking for capacity to increase in the neighborhood area so that you'd have room for those kids. So that growth has got to go somewhere.
Yes.
And
the growth is going to continue.
So,
and that's, I mean, you have to think about that. And we handle that, throughout the year with tracking development review and the interlocal staff working group that meets with the elected officials, looks at development review and provides a concurrency report every year that tracks development review, reserves seats in each of the concurrency areas. We're getting outside of zoning now, into a different part of school planning. But that is considered in this, and that is tracked throughout the year by the school board. So, I mean, you do reserve seats with new developments coming online in schools. I mean, you have to, because that's part of the concurrency agreement.
well, see, now that's where I'm getting confused, because when you say reserve seats, I picture empty classrooms, and you're saying, no, they're full. So when
Everybody's
we
full, yeah.
reserve their seats, we were talking a new school or sending those kids way off somewhere or rezoning yet again.
And concurrency is an extremely confusing process. So essentially what it says is that development review, just like the county and the city review developments coming in, the school board reviews the developments. And if you watch some of the past ones, there's something called a SGM, a student generation multiplier, assigned to new developments coming online. And there's a number that's determined through an algorithm. I'm going to keep it basic, but it's determined through an algorithm that is assigned to the number of units per new development. And that comes in, we look at that at the school board level and say, there is enough room or there is not enough room. Now, these are big zones. Concurrency zones have multiple schools in them. It's not done at the school zone level. These are different zones. And that's probably a topic for another day, but these are not empty seats, but we have to think about the future on this. We have to think 5 to 10 years down the road. We don't want to be in the situation of Meadowbrook opening up with a massive zone and portables in it within 2 years. That is what we're trying to avoid. So when I talk about reserving things, it is, you know, in school I, we're not trying to open school I at 900. We don't want to open any of these schools at, you know, once we get through this, Idlewild, we don't want children in portables at Idlewild. Remember, that is the stated goal. We don't want children in portables. So getting the zoned attendance for Idlewild down, looking at Meadowbrooks, moving the students from these different schools into I, we're trying to address it across the board. And so again, it's not perfect everywhere, but it is addressing these problems and meeting those planning considerations of removing the Meadowbrook portables, removing the Idlewild portables, and dealing with the development that is coming. Does that answer your question, Ms. Legg? There's a lot that goes into it.
It doesn't. And what I'd love to see is that chart that says, this is what we have now, race percentages, capacity percentages, and this is what we're going to have if we were to implement iteration 9. And you did that to some extent on the little pie charts. I'd like to just see the numbers and say, okay, Adelaide was this and now it's that, and go right down.
I think that's great. What I'm hearing from you, and let me make sure I'm capturing this, is that you would like to see the demographic breakdown as well as the planned capacity changes for each of these schools
And
in one slide.
And the achievement thing, because as a parent, if my child's going to be moved to wherever it might be, then the district has a goal to have more or less proportionate racial balance. What about the school grade issue that you raised? You know, we're going to make Terwilliger into maybe a B or a C because we move out children who are struggling to somewhere else. Well, it matters to a parent if you're saying every school is going to be at least a C or better.
Yeah.
Then, you know, worry that somehow, I mean, people get paranoid.
Absolutely. And these are the kind of comments that, you know, from everybody that we really appreciate, because this is very hard to illustrate to people, right? It's a very complex subject. And so, you know, the more I can distill this into one, the more information I can have on a slide that speaks to those questions, that's going to be great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that comment.
And can I'd like to ask the DAC on that, because when we talked about this with the board, and I'd like, I know we got a lot of people at the schools, and so who deal with school grades, you know, as part of the SAC and everything too. We have data from 1819. We were able to run schools. So the data we have is if every kid in 1819 went to the school that they were zoned for in iteration, I believe it was 8, if they attended that. So even though the kid might have been zoned for Terwilliger, if they went to Williams, they're being counted at Terwilliger. I mean, it was based purely on zone lines. So it's not the actual students that went there. It's in the zone lines, and it's 2 years old. And that resulted in, I think Kim has the numbers if we want, but at 5 schools, I think kept the same grade and 3 went up. Terwilliger went from a C to an A, but that's using kids from 2 years ago who were zoned Terwilliger, and then the kids who would be in the new zone for Terwilliger, regardless of actually where they went. So it's kind of 3 degrees of separation. And so I'd kind of like to get your opinion on, is that something even worth sharing? Because it's not really a promise that, or even close to a promise that if we make these changes, Terwilliger goes from a C to an A, because it's 2-year-old data that isn't even really the Terwilliger kids. It's the kids zoned to Terwilliger who might be going somewhere else. So I kind of want to throw that open to all of you on what you think of that as do we keep that for answering a question like this, or do we share it up front?
You're saying share the information about where the students actually attend. Is that what
I'm
you're
saying
saying?
that in order to run the data, that the way that Mr. Charbonnet had to do it, he had to use the zone lines, the students that live in that zone, but it wasn't necessarily every child that went to Terwilliger, went to Hidden Oak, went to Meadowbrook. It was the kids within the zone lines. But so if the kid went to Meadowbrook, was zoned for Meadowbrook, but attended the Foster Magnet, they're still counted in what Jeff ran for 2018. And they would be counted as going to Meadowbrook or going to Terwilliger, depending where they, so it's not a clear, hey, if every kid right now switched to these zones, here's what we think the grades would be. It's if every kid 2 years ago went to the school they were actually zoned for and stayed at this, it's not perfect. That's why I'm worried about it being presented as some sort of fact-based or, so that's where we haven't published that yet. We've talked about it. We have it. It's kind of somewhat useful information, but I don't know that I don't want to tell people that, hey, your school is about to become an A or your school will at least stay a B, because it's not that good. It's just, we don't have scores from last year either. So it's so far removed, but.
You could say things like the goal is not to have schools that are predetermined to be struggling schools. I mean, you can make more general categories so that a parent can be assured that if they're going to be moved from this school, the school they're going to go to is likely to be not only racially balanced, but more or less have a distribution socio and economically as well.
That's good. Dr. Chestnut's
Yes,
been waiting.
thank you. Well, Sue's question goes directly into mine. I was going to ask for the SES level in iteration 8, iteration 9, when you make the changes. Would that be possible to see?
Socioeconomic levels?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's critical, I think.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to see. And so that's one question, Brian. And the other one on the timeline for October 21st, that one is a board meeting, you said?
No,
Yeah.
it's not a board meeting. It's called a rule development workshop, which was why we get confused here. Or I've been confused for 8 years. We have board workshops where the idea is for staff to make presentations to the board about what's going on. A rule development workshop is really designed for the public to be able to interact with the staff members who are putting together the rules. So we call them policies, but under the law, they're rules. So the goal of that is to have John, Kim, me, Reggie, anyone else that we can have, so that a parent can come in and say, well, what would this mean? Or why did we do that? Or I'm just here to say, please don't change my school. Whatever it is that they might want to say, they have that chance to do it. And then we're going to try to do those school-based as well. So it's
I see. Okay. So it's more than a one-shot deal. So the 21st is the 6 hour, that's 6 hours, which would then be extended. I guess you're starting late afternoon and extended after the workday.
No, that one on the 21st is going to run from 10 to 4. It's going to be all day long, just giving people a chance to pop in. So
it's not for parents. That one is not for parents to attend.
But for anyone that can come in during the day.
Well, we're not really making it accessible if you have it from 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock at the end of the day.
And that's why that one's considered the district one, and the school ones will be probably, that's why I have to get with the principals. When do they have their normal meetings? Do they run them from 6 to 8, 5 to 7, whenever the PTA's meetings are and things like that. The school-based ones will be in the evening, so.
Yeah, okay.
But you're talking about, are all of those virtual when you say school-based?
Yes. I mean, we can't do in-person ones with that larger group, and then.
But you have teachers and principals that are not virtual in buildings. I mean, why can't you do some that are in person?
I would love to, because then I can have big maps up on screens, but I think I'm going to get yelled at if I try to bring people into a room together. You know, we're not allowing visitors on campuses, so where am I going to find a big enough space?
Principals on campus, you have students on campus, you have custodians and bus drivers and paraprofessionalals on campus.
I understand. I don't understand what you're.
Who's going to yell?
What?
Who's going to yell at you?
The Alachua County community that's going to say, why are you having unnecessary meetings at the schools?
No, you do it in a manner that works. Get creative and innovative. There's a way to do this.
There's a way to have a meeting where people need to look at a map up close and be 6 feet apart?
Yeah.
Where?
But what, do we need a task force?
No, I'm just, if you have an idea, I'm all ears, but where can I put a place where 250 people might show up to engage in?
Don't let them all come in at the same time, Mr. Moore.
I said, so then how do I invite them to something that doesn't go all night long? I mean, there's logistics.
If you do 6-hour Zoom, you can do a 6-hour event with your maps posted on a board, and you have your people that let them come in a certain number at a time, socially distanced with masks.
Give me 1 minute.
Yeah, you and Mr. Gilraith, and I mean, there's a way to do this. Other districts are doing. We can do this.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I would say that currently, as a working and a parent with young kids, virtual for me, I'm just going to put it out there as a young parent, virtual for me would work the best. Maybe not for everybody. That's where I've been thinking about it on that side. I hear what you're saying, but as somebody, you know, if both parents want to be up there or if both parents want to say something, maybe they don't want to bring their kids in. I think there does need to be a virtual component. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
I'm just saying do both, offer both. I don't think you should do away with the virtual, but I think you need to have both. I think the addition of virtual meetings to this district has been an enrichment and an enhancement. I don't think we need to do away with virtual. I think we need to keep it. It has broadened the scope of outreach to the community, but I don't think we need to do away with in-person, particularly at this time that we have all these staff that are now in person. And I think this can be done and should be done. There are definitely going to be people, when you're talking about their homes and their kids and moving schools, that want to come and see these maps and ask you questions face to face. So
I would much rather do these meetings. I can only envision them in my head working well in person. But
it's a long pointer though, Mr. Moore, a long pointer.
Yeah. But right now we're not allowing visitors on campus. You know, we're not allowing people to rent and do the churches on campus. You know, it would seem inconsistent with those policies of bringing in more adults onto a campus where our primary goal is the safety of the students and staff during the day. I don't know. I
don't have to do it on your campus. You can do it somewhere else. I'm very surprised you can't think innovatively enough and out of the box enough to manage this.
I think that we're doing a fine job, but thank you.
Let's not be
Okay,
personal, please.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to get,
Dr. Chestnut.
I wanted to get to my point. Brian, what I'm just concerned about, even though it is a district level meeting, is the time frame for 6 hours. And I had to just run out to my car to give something to a parent right then. And that's why I had to move. But that people may not be able to tune in 10 to 4. It is the work day, and I'm concerned about accessibility.
I understand, and then but I also have probably 12 staff members, and the the amount of time and the extra hours that are going to be going into all these school-based meetings, which will be after hours, there are, people that actually prefer daytime meetings. It will be YouTubed. You can go back and watch it later. It's not like that's your only chance is while it's happening live. Like anyone can watch. This meeting is on YouTube. It will be up on the board channel. I expect over the next week or two, when we post this link on the page for the updates, that people will watch it, just like they watch the board workshop afterwards too. It's just, we have to figure out a way to do things both. I mean, if we could hold the meetings at night, then it's not fair to the parents who have to make meals and put their kids to bed. When we hold the meetings during the day, then it's excluding the workers. I mean, the city does it. They start meetings at 9. Sometimes they have them at night. I don't know.
And that is why people complain.
I do want to add, and I think it's something that our group will definitely take that feedback regarding meeting times. We need to absolutely make sure that we
You
are
just
offering
stretched it
them
over. Yeah.
at times for everyone to attend, whether they're virtual, in person, whatever, thinking through. And, we will have that one day during the workday, but the other ones will be more evening time. So all of those individual school-based ones, which will also be publicized as well, would definitely most likely would most likely be in the evenings as well, because that's when the schools typically hold PTAs, SAC meetings, those kind of, we're trying to fit when those parent communities are used to meeting with their school.
Okay, thank you.
So there will be, I just wanted to clarify that one day opportunity is not the only opportunity.
Okay,
There will
thank
be
you, ma'am.
many opportunities. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Chestnut. Anyone else? Go ahead, Ms. Taylor.
Yeah, I just had a real quick suggestion. I think since that won't be the only meeting, and with regard to what Ms. Neal just said, I think when that meeting is announced, that should be announced as well, that this isn't it. Here are the other opportunities, so that people don't feel excluded.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question, Ms. Roy.
Go ahead, Ms. Certain.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, can you please explain again the purpose of the 10 to 4 meeting and who the expected or the targeted audience is for that meeting? Because I'm a little confused and I'm concerned that it's 10 to 4. And I've seen PTA signs or signs on schools for PTA meetings at 2 and 3 o'clock. And for working people, when I worked full time, I couldn't get to a PTA meeting and a SAC meeting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I worked downtown and I worked until 5, and my children went to Talbot and the Norton. So I'm concerned. So please help me with that. Give me.
Sure. So in order to meet the Chapter 120 requirements for rulemaking, we have to have rule development workshops. The normal way to do that is to have a period where people can come in and talk to the staff involved in that policy, in that rule. And so knowing that Zoom has a limitation of 100 people and trying to get more than 100 people participating with some sort of advanced Zoom account seems a nightmare. I wanted a long period of time where kind of a district-wide, everyone's there, come ask your questions, come give your input, that there's one of those. That would be like what if we had something in the boardroom where we just opened the doors and we had staff there available to answer questions throughout the day as people came in and left, maybe looked at maps and left. That's what that was trying to replace, an all-day kind of event in the boardroom. And then the evening ones would be with the schools, again, trying to create ways where it's not an overwhelming crowd. If you only have one meeting for the entire district, that's not fair. That's way too many people at one time. But if there's only 50 people that are really all that interested in the Newberry one, that's a nice manageable meeting we can have for the Newberry parents. The Meadowbrook one might, because it's being much more changed potentially. Idlewild has big change. We might have to do 2 with them. But those will be evening ones. I'm anticipating 6 to 8. That's just what I have in my head. But there might be some schools that always do 5 to 7. But those will be the evening ones based on your school. we'll get the principal there, maybe the PTA president, so that we can have, and then a couple staff members to walk them through the process and answer their questions.
And for a very modest fee, you can increase your Zoom capacity from 100 to 300, but it's very, very nominal. I've had to do it.
It's not the cost to me. It's if I have 300 people there to ask questions. I mean, it's hard enough to manage this group of 20 people who have raised their hand and have a question. Getting 300 in to ask questions. So if you ask your question and then switch over to the YouTube, somebody else can join. That was my worry, is trying to manage 300 people who are there to participate at once. So.
Attorney Moore.
It can be.
You have some other staff.
Attorney Moore.
Yes, Dr. McNeil.
Thank you for hearing me. I too am concerned about the time. I do understand your dilemma with 300 or 400 people, but as a board member, unless you are doing a lot of recording or whatever, I want to hear. And if you have your night meetings at each of the 8 schools, that puts pressure on us as well. But I'm going to have to try to make every one of those meetings, if Meadowbrook has 2 or 3, every one of them, because I am held responsible to finally make the decision.
Right. Well, they will be YouTubed. You know, the Zoom meetings are going to be just like this, live link to YouTube, which again can be watched at any time as well. So.
All right, Attorney Moore, we'll talk more privately about it.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? It's really past time to end this meeting.
I have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'd like to know if the board's happy with the new maps, because that was a big comment that I lost sleep over.
I think they could be a little larger, but for my failing sight here.
Please direct comment to us.
The roads and this and being highways being demarcated like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
So, so we won't meet again until after your first 6-hour meeting. Is that right?
I don't know when the DAC meets again.
I'm not sure.
I think
last one was
Jackie
in
Johnson
July
usually,
to October. Excuse me, go ahead.
Jackie Johnson will probably send out an email, but I do have a question, but not related to the school, that, you know, I've had teachers ask, due to the governor's, you know, reopening, is the district definitely going to keep the mask policy in place? I'm hoping so.
Yeah.
I can't ask for the board, and they can't answer here, like make give you a vote. So I will step in and say the emergency policy is still in effect. That has not changed. The board did do first reading on a permanent mask policy that can apply as long as there's a state of emergency. There's a public hearing on that Tuesday. Second reading is still planned for October 20th. That has not changed. So there is nothing in the works right now that would revoke or take away the current face coverings policy that is in place. I have heard no discussion of that. So as far as I know, as long as the COVID-19 is still here and we're under a pandemic, there will be a mask requirement.
Okay, that's good.
And Digital Academy, that was originally through at least January. And as far as we know, that's still the case as well.
That's what the commissioner's emergency order came in and said, this is an order that's effective through the first semester. Our plan was Digital Academy through the first semester. The plan was approved. Does Richard Corcoran change his mind and change? You know, I hope not. But as far as we know, the Digital Academy will be here at least through the first semester. They have not said a word about second semester yet.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Ms. Mosley?
That was my question. A lot of teachers are wondering, is that still into play till January? Was that going to change by 9-week base? So that was one of the concerning.
We might have a lot of parents change, but the Digital Academy should still be an offering all the way through January. I don't remember what the end date of our semester is now after all the changes, but end of January.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley.
I had
Anybody?
a question, Ms. Roy, for Mr.
Okay.
Gilbert before we hang up, and because this has been kind of pondering me. On the maps that we have, like, you have that the zone number of kids in there, and I'm wondering why we're putting so much focus on the number of students that are zoned to a school. Like Idlewild has never had 1,000 kids there, even though it had close to 700 in the prior year. Like, why didn't you make the iterations with the actual number of zone students? I mean, the kids that attend versus the number that are in the zone.
That's a great question. And because number one, we're using 5 years of data looking at that. And, obviously you have students matriculating. When we think about who's actually going there, that can change throughout the year. And we need to think about what could happen. And so we know that for Idlewild, they're way overcrowded, right? We know that. We know Meadowbrook is above capacity, and we know that it is not anywhere near the amount of children who are zoned there that are actually that are attending, and that number could be a lot higher. And so it's almost thinking about it from that side of things. If everybody was going there, what would it look like? We do know, and some of the maps in there showed you the ones that are the closer walking is the students that actually attend, not the ones everybody who's zoned. So you can look and see the ones that are actually attend, but to draw the zones to who is actually going there and not take into account who could possibly go there, because the thing that we hear again and again and again is once they open up a new school, a lot of people are going to want to send their kids there.
I guess what gets me is we say the Idlewild zone, we'll just stick to one school, is
Sure.
1,108 students. So that's 1,108 elementary age students that are zoned for Idlewild.
Yes.
And so but then the actual number of students there is just like half of that. And like I look at where you have the little table on the to the left that has the schools, even that doesn't even total up to the 1,100. So I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on the max number of students that could be going to the school versus what's actually there. And like if we look at the past 2 years, or 3 years, what I've seen, it's been like 70% of that number. So I guess like for me, it's kind of like, I think we're putting too much emphasis on that number is what I think, on that max number. And then I with the Meadowbrook zone, it's like we're moving kids from Meadowbrook, from that north of 39th Avenue area over to Terwilliger, moving them farther away. That's concerning to me because they've been moved 3 times in a short period of time. And the same thing with Meadowbrook. So I was wondering why the Meadowbrook line, why you didn't pull that line south off of 241 and let those children that are on the north end go to Alachua and keep kind of move Meadowbrook's line in off of 241, 143rd Street, move it to the south because they have Irby, they have capacity and all that at Irby and Alachua Elementary.
Mm-hmm. Already only half a mile north of 39th. So. Well,
the thing, so the people that are sending us emails about them moving from Meadowbrook over to Terwilliger, they say they're not that far. You're moving them from a school that's less than 2 miles away from them to someplace 5 miles or 7 miles, whatever it is. I haven't driven it. So, but I'm just asking, if we're doing iterations, why didn't we do that? That's a question. I'd like to see how that would impact.
I think that's a good idea. When we talk about sending children who are zoned to Meadowbrook to Alachua, that's a much longer drive.
No, on the 241 line though, there's students that are along that area there. That's north of 39th Avenue to go up. That's not that far up there to go to Irby.
We can definitely look at that, and that's excellent input. When you look at the area that keeps coming up, right, that has been rezoned 3 times recently, really over the last decade or so, those children have matriculated. That's a long time. It's not totally recent. And when you look at that area, it's almost equidistant to the two. I've heard a lot of the concerns that I heard were traffic on 43rd. We're gonna have to drive onto Newberry or I-75 to get down there.
Right.
That actually goes against the traffic counts. You're going against the flow of traffic there. I'm taking that into account. I'm not telling anybody who's wrong or right. We're taking it as input. I'm going to look at that area that you recommended as well. Why did we do that? Because we are looking at the overcrowding throughout the area. We know that there is continued development in that area for Meadowbrook. And we are trying to avoid a school that is, you know, the newest school with multiple portables out there, with the stated goal and the initiative with the opening of I to get those portables removed. There are a number of ways you can do it. And you could send some up to Alachua. And that's something that we will look at based on that input. I appreciate that input. How did we get there? Well, I mean, we've been looking at the areas again and again and again, and this is the one that we felt comfortable with that met the stated planning considerations in the beginning. And if people aren't comfortable with those, and that's a different, I think, conversation. But to talk about the Meadowbrook and the Idlewild and all of the overcrowding in that area and the transportation issues, that's what we landed on as our beginning discussion. So the input that we're getting now is great. And that's something that we're going to go look at.
The other area of concern I have where you, if I followed you correctly, because I don't have the new slide deck, the additional, was it said up Williston Road, and the South Main area would move from, I'm not sure if they're at Idlewild now or Williams, and they could potentially move to Metcalf. I'd like to see that as an iteration and the impact on that as well. And it looks like it Idlewild, the racial composition in that little pie chart, it looks like it didn't change much of anything.
It does not change, no.
Which is a little odd. And then I want to kind of like say, I don't want to, this is not like a red herring, but on Northwest 143rd Street, Brook Point is really not a public housing project. It's like a workforce development housing that they go. So it's not really like a true, like a swag area thing. So because if you say that, some people may think that it's a true low income housing, and it's really not. That's not.
I appreciate that feedback. You know, that's data we got from the Schimberg Center at UF. And when you go look at public housing, that comes up as a public housing.
Wow. Okay.
So we're not, you know, and you go through, and I've shown you that data, but it's before, but it's, you know, there's lots of different types of public housing that are subsidized, non-subsidized. So I will take that into consideration. Semantics are very important on this. We'll just call it an apartment complex. We'll call it what it is. And so, but it is an area that we've been looking at because they are bus west to Newberry, 7 miles.
Yep, they are.
When they're a lot closer to either Meadowbrook or the I location. And so those are some of the things we're thinking about. And so I apologize for that, but that is something we got from the Schimberg Center as published data.
All right, thanks. I have a couple others. I'll email one to you, my question.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
You all.
If there are no other burning questions, we will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming and being a part of this committee, so important. The meeting is adjourned.
Bye-bye, thank you.